Welcome to Between Two Chairs, Demystifying Commercial Real Estate, the podcast that brings you the latest insights and trends on the South Florida commercial real estate market, with your hosts, Fernando Arencibia Jr. and Jennifer Woolman. In each episode, we dive into the world of commercial real estate and break down complex concepts to make them accessible for everyone. Whether you're a real estate professional, a curious investor, or just interested in the South Florida market in general, Between Two Chairs is the podcast for you. So pull up a chair and join us.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Between Two Chairs. My name is Fernando Arencibia, and with me, as always, is the ever ready. You are like a battery that has it never dies. The battery is always on. I don't know how you do it, partner, but
Cafecito.
yeah, say hi. Jennifer Woolman, everybody.
Hello. And I don't know what noise the ever ready.
Yeah.
I'll spare you all.
All right. And we have a very special guest with us today, and we're gonna be speaking about a municipality in South Florida that has incredible potential. It has a great story of how it was envisioned, and I'm really excited for what we're going to be discussing today. So, Jennifer, would you like to introduce our guest?
You go ahead. Come on. You were his teacher. I love that story. I want you guys to introduce. I love this story.
I love it. Yeah, this is an incredible story. I mean, it's just one of those things in life that, it's very humbling, and it is incredibly, just
Full
makes
circle.
me smile. Right. It's full circle. So as many of you know, in another lifetime, I was a teacher for many years in the county public schools. And today we are going to interview our agent at Avanti Way Commercial and Avanti Way Edge, Joel Mora, who happened to be a student of mine in Coral Park Senior High School.
I feel like there should be a
I know, absolutely. And I'm just so, honored that he would join our company, number one, but also so incredibly proud of what Joel, you have done with your life and putting family first, and what your priorities are. And kudos to your parents and your family for creating that, in you. And I always knew you had that, incredible heart from the moment I met you. And I know that in high school, we had a lot of conversations about brotherhood and about, really taking care of a community. I know that was always your priorities. Very honored to have you here. Very excited for your real estate career. Joel has a lot of experience in managing his own real estate investments and has lived throughout the U.S. And I am going to let him introduce himself and give us a little background of what have you been doing in the last few years, what has brought you to real estate, and more importantly, your move to Weston, to the City of Weston. Go ahead.
Sure.
Joel.
Thank you, Fernando and Jennifer, for having me. I will say it will never be comfortable for me saying Fernando. I don't know if you noticed in our text messages, I just say hi. I don't even write your name because it's always Mr. Arencibia to me.
That's funny.
I will say that Fernando was my teacher. AP World History
That's right.
Was what it was, and also our advisor for student council. So I got to spend a lot of time learning, not just the academics, but he taught me a lot about, like he said, brotherhood. And I really took that to heart. It was a sad day. I was very angry with him when he left teaching, but I now understand. It took me some years. But yes, so real estate, I started in 2020. The pandemic really it was when everything started for me, mostly because my wife and I decided to move back down to South Florida. We spent 10 years, I would say 10, 11 years away from South Florida because she was training in her medical profession, doing residency, med school, fellowship. And we basically traveled across the country. Every 3 to 4 years, we were moving. And then in our last stop in Pittsburgh, a great city, we had our oldest, and we realized that when they say it takes a village, it does. So we wanted to be closer to family. She luckily was offered a position at Cleveland Clinic, Florida here in Weston. And that's how we kind of ended it here in Weston, which I am a massive cheerleader for. I would never expect. I am a Miami-Dade 305 kid, Westchester. Never spent much time in Broward, but now I do hail its praises a lot. And the real estate really started because of our need for flexibility. And, my wife has a very demanding job. We have kids, and real estate kind of allowed us to be flexible with being responsible for kind of the day-to-day of the kids, but also be productive. And we started with one rental property in Texas. We then moved into buying an Airbnb cabin in North Georgia. I managed those remotely. And I just felt like, well, I want to do something down here. I want to do something close to home. Managing remotely is pretty easy now, but there's nothing like having, things at arm's reach, as I say. And then I wanted to really go into being a realtor as opposed to just an investor, mostly as, I'm no saint or anything, but as the service aspect. I noticed a lot of friends and family reading things that weren't accurate or being taken down paths that seemed like potential obstacles for them. Things that I also went through in my investor experience. And I just didn't want them to go through those things and wanted to provide more knowledge and service for them. So it's kind of, real estate. Sometimes we only buy one house in our lifetime, and we want to make sure we're making the right decisions. So you want to make sure that you have all the knowledge you can and have someone by your side that's really in your corner. And going back to, Fernando teaching me about brotherhood and community and stuff like that, that's always stayed with me. And I just kind of want to be there to help.
That's awesome. And I love that story and the fact that your wife is in healthcare. And when we had our strategy session after you completed the onboarding, we said, what a great fit, because you have a background as an investor. You obviously live in Weston, and then your wife is in the medical field. So for all those reasons, medical became kind of your focus, right? So you're going to be focusing on the medical and healthcare space and helping, doctors and healthcare techs and nurses and everything that are moving, but also the office space side, right?
Yeah, it's when we moved down, the way I feel like most relationships work in the medical profession is if one spouse isn't in the field, the one that isn't in the field is the one that's taking care of a lot of the logistics. And reasonably so, especially if you're in the stage that my wife was in, where you finish fellowship, you got boards, you have exams that you have to study for. These are very important exams, and you should be really spending as much time studying for them. So then the spouse kind of falls into the place of just like, well, we got to find a place to live, and we need to figure out what we're doing for daycare, and we need to learn about this new city that we're moving to. And when we got to Weston, we didn't have much of a guide. We had one family member that lived here that provided a lot of information, but you just land somewhere and you start driving around. And it's hard in certain cities to really gauge what's going on there from just driving around for one day, because sometimes you only have one day. You're flying in, you're flying out, you have interviews. So I think my kind of motto is I've been there. I've been through that phase of moving places. I've been through that phase of being in a medical relationship, I guess you can say, and understanding also the ins and outs of like the demands that being in a hospital system makes, and also if you wanted to go out and be by yourself. So, there's great hospitals, just in this area alone, within a 10-mile radius, you have about like 6 major hospitals. Cleveland Clinic being, rated the second best quality hospital in the state. So we have great hospitals, but those hospitals also don't provide everything. So we have great practitioners who have opened their own practices that are doing fantastic. For instance, Cleveland Clinic doesn't have a pediatrics or an OB division here. So we have great practitioners in the area that do provide that. And being able to help those practitioners find those spaces, because sometimes they are experts in medicine, but they are so hyper focused in that they kind of get lost in the like, well, what is this real estate stuff? What does it mean to taxes and interest and leases and all that stuff? So having someone that kind of understands that more, I think helps provide some, comfort and knowledge to their
Yeah, no, you're definitely a perfect person. And thank you for giving us that background, because we always tell people most of us don't start in real estate. We come from some different background, or somebody, be it a spouse's career or something, leads us into the field kind of by default. So thank you for sharing that, so that other people can help connect the dots if they're wondering, where do I focus in terms of an asset class, or how do I figure out where I fit in this whole real estate ecosystem. So let's do a dive, because we both attended a city spotlight that highlighted Weston. And when I first moved here, Weston was under construction, and we
Yeah.
actually went there and looked at potentially moving there and buying there, because it was this planned community by Arvida, which was owned by Disney at the time. So go ahead and do a dive, because I think one of the interesting things, and why you have chosen to focus on medical, both on the commercial side and on the residential side, is because you're focusing on Weston. And
Exactly.
Weston is a place where if you work in Weston, you can easily live in Weston, and vice versa. So can you do a deep dive into the history, the background, kind of your insights on the city as a place for the community?
Sure. So name Weston is because we are the westmost city in Broward. We are bordered by the Everglades. We have what I call swamp puppies who like to cross Griffin every once in a while. It's about 27 square miles. And I find it, extremely beautiful. I think what makes this city so attractive and its property value so high is its attention to detail in the parks and the landscaping of the city. Weston's highest budget expenditure is public safety. After that, which is very rare for most cities, is parks and recreation and landscaping. They spend a lot of money on that. Every elementary school that you see here in Weston will have a public park attached to it, right? We have great events, we have great fields, and we keep adding facilities. We are now having a new indoor complex being built in Vista View Park. So it is really attractive for especially families to come here and take advantage of everything the city offers. Sometimes, you hear people who live in different municipalities, they pay a lot in taxes. Understandably, it's a major expense, and they go, where is this money going to? And Weston, you just need to get out of your house, and you're going to see people working on the landscaping in the city, working in the parks. You're seeing that money at work. The taxes are not low, but at least you're saying, hey, yesterday we had a storm, we had palm fronds everywhere, and the next day we saw people picking up all the palm fronds, we saw people manicuring all the green spaces. So you kind of see it at work. And I think that those parks and recreation, that landscaping really attracts a lot of like I mentioned, schools are great here. Every public school is rated A in Weston. Our high school, Cypress Bay, is like top 44 in the state. So you don't have, when I had my oldest, and then we later had, we have a 3-year-old. I live in a corner where I don't have to get in my car to go to an A-rated school for middle school, elementary school, or high school. That ability to just be free and not worry about that. Now, and we also have great charter schools, and we have great private schools and Catholic schools too, if that is the route that you want to go to. But, I know that we have school choice, but it doesn't take away from you being close, those who deal with traffic, to those schools, and the ability for those schools to ask for parent advice and have a connection with the community. So I think we have Parks and Rec, we have the schools. I think that on top of that, although commercial is not, I think 3% of the land is for commercial in Weston, because it is mostly focused on families here and residential. I think that it should be commended that our commission is open to opening up its spaces to certain ventures. For instance, we're going to open, I think at the end of the year, Chick-fil-A's only distribution center for the state, right? And I think it's number 10 in the country, is going to be here in Weston. And that's out of, if you're a business, if you're a corporation, if you come into the commission and explain its benefits and how it won't hurt Weston's, family first, goal here, they're very much willing to work with you. I mean, one of the biggest businesses here, UKG, they actually, a lot of the residents were working for them, and they were looking to open headquarters in another state. And because the residents didn't really want to leave, it's a tech company, we're focused on payroll and HR solutions. They decided to open their headquarters here. So it's not like, while there isn't a lot of commercial space, there's still, if you're willing to work with the community, a great place to open your business, whatever it may be.
Right. And UKG's was like significant. It's 155,000 square foot long-term lease. And I think it's interesting what you said about the commercial, because the way commercial is set up, and maybe you can describe it a little bit better than I can, is you have the middle, right? In the middle, you have like the Weston Town Center, which is kind of your downtown community hub. And then everything else really hugs I-75 heading north or heading west, right?
Yes, exactly. And that's the other great thing about Weston, is that sometimes people think it's so far out west, but we have major arteries that border us. We have US 27 Okeechobee, we have I-75, which, you can go south and take the express lane. By the way, I love express lanes. So my wife hates it. She's like, you never see a dollar that you won't spend. But I can take the I-75 expressway to the 826 expressway and be at my parents' house in Westchester in less than 30 minutes. So we have great arteries. And then you have 595, so you can go out to the airport and be there in less than 30 minutes. You can go out to Fort Lauderdale Beach, Hollywood Beach, in less than 30 minutes, because we have these major arteries. And I wouldn't be surprised if, when Chick-fil-A was looking for a location, they saw those arteries, and being able to go out on Alligator Alley and go to Marco Island in an hour and a half, or Naples, or whatever it may be. So that's kind of one of the great things, is everyone thinks that we're so far away, but with these major arteries, it's not that far, to be honest.
Does it feel, as a resident of Weston, the lack of commercial real estate, and do you feel like you're lacking in any amenities?
No, I don't feel like I'm lacking. And look, I'm a dad, and the majority of my budget goes to groceries, and we don't stop opening Publixes here. There's a Publix. You can get to a Publix here within 5 minutes, right? There's also Key Foods grocery store, and then if you want something different, Aldi's is 10 minutes away if you're going over there. Costco is 10 minutes away if you're going down to Southwest Ranches. We also are surrounded, I'm a big cheerleader for Weston, but the communities that surround the Southwest Ranches, Davie, Plantation, Pembroke Pines, they kind of help. The only thing we don't have is a Target for my wife, but then that's an excuse for us to go to Sawgrass, and that's fine. Weston isn't really built to have a major retail space like that. And we also appreciate, some of the mom and pop stuff here that you wouldn't expect, from restaurants that are opening that are Venezuelans and Colombian focused. We have our Gracianos, thank goodness, that I was worried I wouldn't have. I used to go very often down when it was in Westchester. So now we have one here. So we like having this kind of, if you ever go to the Weston Town Center, which is the commercial space, it feels like Main Street USA in Disney World. That's basically what it is, so it's that while we don't have major retail centers, I don't think that the residents are really looking for that. And we don't feel like we're missing it. And also Amazon has kind of solved a lot of those. The Amazon trucks here are running the city up and down.
Well, I find interesting because it sounds to me like there is a feeling that there is a lot of input with your representatives in Weston, that the city is there to listen. As you mentioned, you certainly see the investment in the city and what they're doing with tax dollars. One of the things that both of you shared with me was this interesting permitting process that they utilize and what they've chosen to do. So I would like for you guys to go a little bit into that, because I find that to be extremely interesting.
Yeah, so at this meeting, not only was Mayor Peggy Brown there, but so was the CFO, and they were explaining, and it was new for me too to learn, that Weston outsources its permitting to a third-party company. So it's a completely virtual experience for permitting. And what's interesting, what they said, is that that company is paid when it processes a permit. So there is an incentive there for that company to do work fast. And you can go on and always see where your permit stands and if it's held up, what's holding it up. And sometimes we are working with contractors. I love them all, but sometimes when things are running a little slow, they might blame the city, and you can see what process and who is it's being held up by. And oftentimes permits here are being processed within 3 to 5 business days. So
Woohoo! That's insane. That's amazing.
So what do they do? The process is virtual. They have this third-party company, but then they have city employees that are actually doing the physical inspections.
Yes, exactly. So I had solar panels installed in my house, and the company did the permitting process, but we had a city employee who came out to really inspect the work at the end and make sure everything was fine. So there is obviously a city component, but the whole processing part of it is really third party. And I think what's interesting is we might be seeing this throughout the state because Mayor Peggy Brown is now the president of the League of Mayors in the state. And, they're really kind of pushing what works for, obviously every city's different. Weston was a planned community, right? Not every city had that luxury of being a planned community, but sharing this information, they're very open to doing it because we travel the state. We want our brothers and sisters across the state to be doing well. So I find that very interesting that they're kind of always looking for ways to be more efficient. And at the same time, the city doesn't feel like this technocratic beast because the city manager, Don Decker, is constantly answering questions on Facebook from people from the Weston, Florida groups. I don't really see that in many municipalities and cities. Obviously, we're not as large as some, but to have the city manager answer like, hey, why is this pole being constructed here and this? Mm-hmm. And he's answering within a day, that I don't think it's within his job duties to be answering on social media these answers, but you feel like there's a connection between the government and the city here. And I think that's really a kind of important.
Well, and going back to the permitting, I think it's brilliant. And when she said that she was trying to take it statewide, I mean, anybody who's listened to this podcast for any amount of time has heard that one of our biggest complaints from everybody, brokers, tenants, landlords, sellers, buyers, it's the permitting process. And you're saying, well, yeah, we're a small community, but I see it being even more efficient from a third party standpoint for the bigger cities, because now you first of all, you're not paying somebody to process that has no incentive to hurry up and do it fast, right? If you're on a salary. Yeah. And second of all, it frees up those salaried people to go out and do the physical inspections, which a lot of time they're overworked, right? They don't have enough personnel. And if they're doing both, now you can free up people that you already have hired. Instead of having to do the permitting process itself, they're just doing the inspection. So kudos to you. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think it's wicked brilliant, and we're going to be pushing it on the realtor side because we've already been exploring that because people are getting frustrated, and we don't like taking over city control, right? But if cities are so inefficient and don't do what their population is asking them to do for over 15, 20 years, then that's where you have to go to the state and then you do this whole law. So I think what you guys are doing in Weston is brilliant.
Well, it's very interesting because this is a way in which cities find ways to differentiate themselves from other municipalities, and we always like to highlight when there are unique experiences that cities create, especially with the permitting process, which can be such a, in many municipalities leave such a negative experience for the people that live in those municipalities. And we did an interview with Linda Julian, commissioner for
Miami
Gardens. They have this process in which basically they bring all of the parties together. Everybody who's going to evaluate the plans from, MEP, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, all the way to, the zoning, the fire inspector, everybody's in a room listening to the presentation. We're going to do this project. And then they get to ask questions. They get to share in any concerns. And, that's an incredible process. This virtual process has a lot of legs, in my view, right? Because there are some things that are just redundant information, right? You're just checking off some of the things to see if it fits within the criteria. And then if there is any concern, to have that ability to communicate back quickly and get a response is invaluable. Plus, let's be honest, a third-party company that has this virtual system is most likely already implementing AI procedures
Yes.
that would allow it to move even faster in the future and process a lot of this information very efficiently. I think that everybody really evaluates how efficient their government is when they go and apply for a permit.
Exactly.
That's when you really know if they're efficient and if they're good at what they're doing.
And I think they were thinking, being that it's a planned community, that there are going to be stages in a municipality city's life where there's going to be an extreme amount of traffic of permits. These houses now, because these communities in the way that they were built, we're already starting to go into our second roofs, right? So in my community, I live in Avanti Way Weston, there's like 600 homes. We're all doing our second roofs. Imagine the funnel of permitting that needs to go through. Having this third party take care of that, I think, really alleviates some of the baggage that could end up happening. And then now everyone wants pools, and we're building pools, and it's just a lot of paperwork. And I think, you can easily poo-poo the idea because it's a third party. What is their incentive on, doing a good job? But this city really cares. This city, you cannot take out a plant, a tree, without having approval. They will fine you every day. You will have to put it back. They're meticulous. They're tagging their trees, right? They know what every tree is doing and how it's doing.
And Joel, to your point, they're incentivized by processing, not by approval.
Exactly.
They're just and the reality is that, as a consumer, right? And you're going to apply for the best thing you want is, I want a quick response. I want to know, did I mess up in the application? Do I need to do something else? Am I wrong to find out? But at the end of the day, if there is if it doesn't get approved or there is an issue, it's going to be the city that's going to make that ultimate decision.
Exactly. I was very surprised and happy to know that my city's doing this.
That's awesome.
And the other thing, when you were mentioning parks, one of the great things, and all of the landscaping, one of the great things is the interconnectivity that the city has done, not only with their streets, because it's planned, so the planned community has very logical, street design, but also the network of bicycle lanes and sidewalks that they have. And their sidewalks, I live in a city that put in sidewalks after the fact. Nobody uses them because they're cracked, they're broken. If you're walking when it's semi-dark, you're going to break your neck. But in Weston, and again, this is where I laugh, this is the Disney-esque portion of Weston, is that everything is perfect. I'm serious. And that is the Disney thing. Like, you throw garbage out at Disney and you turn around and your garbage is already gone. You're like, wait. And Weston's the same.
Stop littering, Jennifer. My God.
I'm not on the floor.
She's throwing it out there to see how quickly they pick it up. She's testing the system.
There's no mosquito fly.
The officers here would never let that slide. There's so many that you're going to get caught.
The sidewalks are perfect. They don't have, we get a lot of rain. They don't have that rainy stuff. They're obviously pressure cleaned or treated. All of that stuff adds up to quality of life. Tell us a little bit about some of the big developments that are going on. I know she mentioned something that's been on again, off again for several years, which is the Bonaventure development.
Yeah, so it's interesting because, to be honest, right now it sounds like that's a little bit up in the air. There was the Bonaventure Resort Hotel. Someone bought it and they wanted to turn it into kind of rentals, large, multifamily. And there was a lot of blowback in the community because a lot of it is traffic. We have to think about these roads. There's Western Road that borders kind of the city, and then all these other kind of winding roads that are within the city. They can only handle so much. You ask any parent here when it's between 7:30, 9 a.m. and they're driving by one of our top-rated schools. It's the only time that you might see some sad faces or angry faces in the community because there is a lot of traffic. So having a large, multifamily rental community was not a big want from this community. But my understanding is that now that permit from the person who bought the company that bought that land has expired. So they kind of have to start from zero with the city. And the city is always, it sounds like they're always open to working with them, but a large multifamily, 6th, 7th floor situation, it doesn't sound like it's going to be popular here is how I would phrase it. And that's kind of, going back to commercial, traffic patterns is a big thing that when you're building um, stuff here that they're going to look into, and what the impact is going to be. And I will say that, there's like, I think there's like less than 1% of developable land here in Weston that is vacant. That doesn't mean that, I've looked at their future land use and their comprehensive plan. They allow for 5% of like flexible zoning that can mix a little bit of residential and commercial. It doesn't mean like, hey, Weston's full. We're not going to even look that way. They're opening to, realizing that this is a breathing city that changes with the times. So they're allowing for some flexibility there in the future. I think it's all in, what is it that you're offering and how you're working with the community.
Have you heard, and this goes back a little bit to our medical, because our previous episode, we talked about medical and we talked about kind of senior care with what Miami Jewish Hospital's doing in Broward. And I thought they were building an assisted living facility on like 6 acres off of Racket Club. I don't know what the status of that is, if they decided to go ahead with that or not.
I'm not. I
Heard that.
don't
Okay.
know about. I haven't heard that. I do know that we do have a lot. Maybe that I know of one or we definitely have two sort of senior communities here. You will see that are. I know I have friends who have their parents there that really provide a great service, especially getting the seniors around the city with their little white buses. I like seeing them. They get off at the Publix, and I like to help them out every once in a while. We do have some of those. We do have a community, a lot. We have a good amount that actually came and bought in the 90s and have stayed around. Some of those are leaving. Their kids are staying in those homes, and some of them really want to stay because of the park situation. And now that we're having this indoor facility that they're building up Vista View, the purpose of it is that we don't really have an indoor recreational center that is by the city. We have the YMCA, which is a great facility I'm a member of. I've put my girls through every program they have in there, but nothing that's run by the city. And the YMCA can't accommodate, I think, the entire city. So they're building this with that in mind, and not only for our young ones who it gets so hot in here, but also for our seniors, having an indoor track to kind of walk inside as opposed to just dealing with the mugginess of the Everglades sometimes and the heat. Is they're thinking about that. So I haven't heard about that development, but I wouldn't be surprised if that does end up happening.
This indoor recreation facility has been described as massive. So what do you expect will be in that indoor facility? Because it looks like
I've heard indoor tracks. I've heard pickleball. Because there's also an outdoor component. I've heard basketball. The way I kind of look at it is, if you're familiar with like the center and like Doral that they have, that kind of recreations, it feels to me like that's what we're kind of doing here in our own Weston way. And I think it's realizing, if it's not the heat, I have my daughter in soccer here at Weston Regional Park. I'm trying to see if they give me zoning to build like an efficiency there, because I'm there every day.
A little ADU.
A little ADU.
A little ADU. Come on, Weston, help me out. Help someone out. That's all I need is air conditioning. But if it's not the heat, it's the rainouts in the afternoons. So sometimes we want to take advantage of these spaces, but the elements are going to do what the elements are going to do. So having this indoor facility, I think, kind of allows us to really get out of our houses, be in community, which is, I think, another great thing about here is that there's it's 27,000 households, but it does feel like a small community, and be in the community and be a part of it. Because I think the more that the people are a part of the community, see what's going on and out of their houses, the more that there is care taken for the city.
That's phenomenal. I wanted to ask you, you have a very interesting perspective, very unique in that you're the spouse of a surgeon in a city that it has, to your point, within a radius of 10 miles, you have
6 major
hospitals. What is unique about that experience of relocating for a family? Just because I'm sure there was a high level of uncertainty, where are we going to end up, and then I'm sure there was a layer of happiness to be able to end up in Weston. But give us a little bit of that perspective, that people maybe things have that maybe people are not considering when it comes to relocating for a medical family, for lack of a better term?
Sure. I think for a medical family, the thing that you have to think about, there's two perspectives. There's the one who's the physicians, and my wife is all about like, I need to be as close to the hospital as possible. If the hospital offered housing, I think we would probably live there. And it all depends your specialty. She's in a surgical specialty. She just wants to be able to be close to her patients in case there's anything happening. Although, we have great residents in Cleveland Clinic and fellows, but you always want to be close to the hospital. I do know some physicians who'd like to be away. There's some that work in Cleveland Clinic and are in Coral Springs because they're like, I want to be far away from work. And I totally get that because you need your peace and quiet to be able to go to work the next day. But I think, you want to think about travel time, whether you are the person that wants to be close or you want to be far away. How far away do you want to be? Because, Cleveland Clinic, like I said, offers a large variety of specialties, but we don't have OB and we don't have pediatrics. So my daughter was born at Memorial, a great hospital. But Memorial for me from Weston was a 15-minute drive. It's right next to CB Smith Park. So even if you worked at Memorial, let's say not Cleveland Clinic, I think Weston is still a great option. So thinking about that travel time is a great thing. I think thinking about what the city offers you in terms of services is the biggest thing. I remember, not to talk about Weston only, but when I was in Pittsburgh also had a great parks budget, right? And they spend a lot of time on their parks and their trails and stuff like that. Because I think as members in a medical family, the physician and the family, if they're both, there's a lot of stress being put on them, right? And that stress can travel through the family, and you need outlets. Parks, I think, are a great outlet. Being in nature is a great outlet because you need to breathe fresh air. You need to touch grass, as we say, to just kind of decompress everything that you're taking in, because what a lot of these physicians are dealing with is not easy. We go to them and we have our consultation and we leave and continue on our day, but they're taking on another person right after that who has either worse conditions or who knows, right? So I think having a city that has services where you can really decompress is key, that I never really thought about until I was in Pittsburgh. And then I wanted to find, we lucked with Cleveland Clinic that the city that surrounds it offers those things. And then if you have family, it's schools. You're thinking about schools. But I think if you're talking about the relationship aspect, I think there has to be a little bit of a leap of faith, which I think is with anything, right? Even when you're like take out, being in a medical relationship. But if you're buying a property, whether it be for primary residence or for investment, you can do all the pro formas. If it's an investment, you can do all the pro formas you want. But if the next day there's an interest rate hike or cut or something happening in the news or a major employer is leaving
or an epidemic
or an pandemic, right? There has to be a leap of faith. And I think the best way I've taken that is like, hey, this is a new adventure. I spent 10 years, every 3 to 4 years, having a new adventure, looking for a new job, and just saying, well, this is what I wanted. I wanted to be the kid that traveled across the country, and my wife was allowed me to have that vehicle with her and support her, obviously. So you got to just take that leap of faith as like, it's a new adventure, and try not to think too much about like catastrophizing everything. So I think when you're in that space because so much of a medical professional's life, while they do all the work of studying and working, there's a match system, right? You're ranking, outside of, when you're finally done with your training, you're ranking people, you're ranking facilities, they're ranking you. And then one day you open an envelope and you find out where you're going. And that's where you got to go.
Right. It's not like you get to pick where you go.
Exactly. So you're just like, well, I thought I was going to go to Duke, but now I'm going to Northwestern in Chicago. I thought I was going to live in California, but now I'm living in Montana. And you just got to go with it. Don't try to ride the wave, ride the wave as best as you can. And when you're in those places, find your community, find your services that are going to help you decompress, and, have hopefully a good partnership that's going to help you ride that wave as high as you can.
Yeah.
I think that's an amazing quality that anybody in the medical field, especially when they're going through their fellowships and residencies and finally getting a job, because most people don't like change, right? Most people like knowing the next steps. Most people, and that's part of like why the economy is so crazy right now, right? Because there's no stability. Nobody knows what's going to happen next. There's no, usually you can pretty much have a pretty good idea of what's going to happen. If interest rates do this, then everything else is going to do this. But in this economy, nothing. And what you just described for most people would give them severe anxiety because everything is an unknown until you open that envelope, right? So I think the fact that you have that perspective and that you've had that experience, you're perfectly placed where you want to focus right now, because again, going back to the episode we just did, from the hospital standpoint, what they were saying was one of the huge issues that they have is dealing with keeping their staff. How do they keep their workforce happy? How do they keep their doctors happy? Some of it had to do with the cost of living here, but a lot of it just had to do, to your point about travel time, with travel time and being stuck in traffic and quality of life. So I think, not only where you are in Weston, but where you are mentally and professionally, you're in the perfect place.
Thank you. Yes. I mean, the 11% of the residents who live in Weston work in healthcare. Their average commute time is about 30 minutes for work. I think we want it better, but it can't get better in South Florida.
Yeah, 30 minutes is nothing. It takes me that long to get to the grocery store.
That's right.
Yeah, you won't finish an episode of Between Two Chairs between getting out of the house and going to work.
That's a good thing.
That's a good thing.
So maybe we want longer travel times.
Perhaps. Well, Joel, thank you so much for joining us today. It's really a pleasure to have you and for you to share with us everything that you know about this incredible city of Weston and its growth. But I really enjoyed the fact that you were able to share your perspective of what relocating looks like and feels like for a medical family, and really understanding the dynamics of what that job does to a human being and the need to have that outlet. And this is where, in real estate, we always talk about location, and people just think, well, you just got to pick the right spot, but it's the amenities that are surrounding the location that makes that location so important. And your description of Weston, I think you hit the nail right on the head there.
Thank you. It was great being here. I love talking about this city. I'm going to be here definitely for at least 18 years because don't have to get into a car to take my kids to school. That is the coolest thing until they graduate high school. So I'm not leaving, and it's a great seat. And thank you all for having me. It's being part of Avanti has been awesome. And congratulations, Fernando. I heard you just won secretary you were elected. Sorry.
Yeah.
So congratulations on that.
Thank you. I was
trying to follow in your footsteps.
I just given another job. That's all. That's all that happened. All that happened is I was just given another job, another volunteer job. But no, thank you for it. It's my honor.
Is there any last words or insights that you want to share or leave our listeners with regarding Weston, medical field, office space, anything at all?
I think about Weston in the medical field, I think the one thing I do want to let people know is that you don't know where life is going to take you, and whenever it's too hard, this too shall pass. Whenever it's too easy, this too shall pass. But if you find your way back to the people who keep you grounded, like Mr. Adencibia did for me a very long time ago, it will help you go through those waves. So just find your people. I think that's the only thing. Find your people, find your community, find your location.
I love that so much.
Amen.
I was going to say jinx. You can say it at the same time. Amen was better. We'll stick with amen.
We'll do it. Well, thank you everybody for joining us on another episode, and a very special episode of Between Two Chairs for Jennifer Woolman and myself. We really appreciate your continued listening and your input and your commentary. Thank you very much for being a part of this humble podcast.